sadhana?
Sadhana is a name that means practice, and when we do a 21-day sadhana immersion, it is just a time for focused practice. And sadhana is also something you can take on, not only as a course, but as a focus for your practice. So, for example, if you notice yourself going into loops around judgment, for example, you can take on a sadhana where you make it the focus of your awareness to bring light and consciousness into these unconscious patterns. So I love to use Sanskrit words simply because they have certain nuances. Yeah, that it's not only this or only that. It has also the space in between embedded in the words, which I love. So what we do in the retreats is sadhana, but we have chosen to call these online immersions our sadhana intensives. Shall I tell you the transition for me was that I, for now almost 16 years, I've been traveling more than 6 months a year, been traveling around practicing with the women. It's the joy of my life. It's just such a privilege to be able to do this. And I'm practicing and exploring, and I feel that I have only dipped my little toe in the possibility and the potential that is opening to us here. So these few moments I have on planet Earth, I want to spend in the circle. But I also have a family. I also have kittens and a home. And I just saw that it was not sustainable for me to travel that much in order to reach the women that I wanted to reach and practice with. And so it just became obvious that it's time to do something online, something that we don't have to travel to gather. And I was struggling for a long time what kind of form that would take. And it actually came in a dream. I was stuck in different kind of formats of how should we do an online course. And then in a dream, I woke up. It was in the beginning of December. I remember it very clearly. And I had a dream of these 21 days of immersion in the practices. Part of the dream was also that part of the income was going to be donated. I think at that time there was a drought in Africa. And so that was part of the dream, that the income was also going to be donated to this cause. And that kind of opened up the creativity for me, and it made it easy. And that was the beginning of a community that has now practiced together for very bad in numbers, but it's
about 10 years, I think.
Okay, yes, it's a long time.
Maybe
and we practiced twice a year in English, twice a year in German, where we have a translation. And there are women part of the circle who have never met me in person. Women who are in live in countries that maybe makes it more difficult for them to travel, and they still have claimed a seat in this circle. And the circle is just much bigger than what I could create, or even my intention or dream. It's beyond anything I could imagine.
So it's more than what you imagined it would be.
Yes, absolutely. And it's only the beginning. It's only the beginning, I know.
Right. There's another thing that you love, that you adore, that is such a part of all of our sadhanas, and that is the goddesses.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I am out of the closet, full-blown goddess worshiper. It's the center of my life. And it's funny because my spiritual upbringing did not include goddesses, and it didn't even include deities. I was very much trained in the Advaita kind of relationship to God or spirit as my own consciousness, maybe more influenced by Buddhism, Advaita. It was actually not a deity. So it took me by surprise, that devotion. has become such a core part of my practice. I just can't help myself. It's a love affair.
Do you remember which was the very first goddess you practiced online sadhana?
We actually, the very first sadhana we practiced with, we called it a spiritual cleanse, and we practiced with some ancient tantric teachings, the Vigyan Bhairavi Tantra, and so it was not a specific goddess in the beginning. And I think the next one was maybe Durga. Durga is my favorite goddess. I shouldn't say that.
What do you love about Durga?
Durga has been, it's very challenging for me. She is mirroring to me a power that is transcending the different strategy of power that I find myself scrambling in and trapped by. Ever since I was a little girl, I learned places where I could feel safe, like strategies of how I could behave in order to feel safe. And growing up in Norway, which was very focused on women's empowerment, I also learned a certain way of fighting for my power, a certain way of competing with men to show that women are just as good as men. So all of this baggage I bring with me when I explore power. And then meeting Durga, who is this goddess who just sits in such a softness. She sits in such a sovereignty, but fully devoted to the benefit of all beings. She's so full of love, but she shows us how love sometimes is a fierce boundary, how love sometimes is a no, how power is a yes to what you love the most that brings you power. So she's why I say she's challenging is that she, looking into her as a mirror, I see all the ways that I'm scrambling. That just makes me small. They are kind of pseudo power, which I think kind of, if I'm in control, I feel powerful. But practicing with her shows me that I'm actually very fragile when I'm in a more contracted, tense power, because I'm out of balance. I'm uprooted from the source of the real power.
I know some people call that a feminine power. Is that is that a word that you would use?
I've used that a lot. It was very important, particularly in the beginning when we started this, to explore what is spirituality through woman. But that's only relevant because it's been so dominated by men. Like the default, when we say spirituality, what we actually mean is male spirituality. Okay, it's the same with our big work around racism today. It's like when we say human, it's almost like we say white, and oftentimes white male, and all others are others. Yeah, and it's the same with spirituality. It has been so dominated by men. All the religions were created by men. So when we say spirituality, or we look at and study the maps, all of it is actually male spirituality. So for us, it has been incredible, important to explore. But hey, what can happen if I actually explore what spirituality is through woman, without comparing myself, without competing, without trying to be like those maps. But the deeper we then go in to that exploration, the less gender is important. Okay? It's only important because it's been so imbalanced. In our practice, gender is important also because we are using the body as a portal into awakening. So we are using particularly the woman's body. We have also women who have transitioned from a man's body, and they find their way to practice with the body they have. So we don't want to be too fixed in the gender differences, in the sense of that, it is a danger for that to create more separation. And of course, our intention with our practice is is to relax into the union that we are all part of, rising out of, dissolving back into.
Hmm.
Mm.
I want to remind everyone that if you're watching on your computer, there's a chat box that I can look at. So maybe toward the end, we'll take a couple of questions. Next, I wanted to ask you about the way that you choose the goddesses. I've noticed over these many years, you seem to, well, I don't know. Let me have you describe how each time do you choose who we will follow in that sadhana?
Yeah. I've had that question before, and I've been exploring that question before, and it's not a specific thing. It's not the same every time. But what it is, it's a deep listening. It is to do my own practice. And part of my seat in this circle is to be almost like a translator, that I can feel into what the field is. And I a lot of our practices has to do with receptivity and listening through not only the verbal, through not only the eyes, but to awaken the whole body, so that we can begin to sense the underlying currents, the rhythms that are moving us. And for me, the circle is an intelligence that we create together. And part of what I have trained myself, just as somebody would train themselves to play the violin, I have trained myself in this lifetime to play, to listen to the music from the circle. So this is so it's kind of a mix of just like a longing in me, and how I just listen, and then sometimes it can change the last minute. Sometimes I think I'm clear of what goddess it is that we are working with, and then suddenly another one comes in, and we have to shift. My team has learned that can happen, and sometimes we just have to kind of, okay, we are doing something completely different. Then we go with that.
Fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
Last year when you did Gaia, was this the first time to practice with her in the sadhana?
Yeah, it was.
And it seemed like it came from your travels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to the Ecuador rainforest, the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador in last summer, and it really was so life-changing. So, there's one thing about what we experience, the content of our experience. And another thing is also the context or the framework that we perceive the content of our experience. And sometimes we have experiences that are not only so new in content, but they are so new in framework that you can't place them in anywhere known in the brain. And for me, the first time I went to India, I was 20 years old, it was like that. Suddenly I saw what I had called reality was just one version of reality. It was my condition. It was the framework that I looked at the world through. And to be in the Amazon rainforest with the indigenous people there, people who are living so far away from anything of what we call civilization, and to be with them and the way they live was just so life-changing. It was just so outside any known framework that I have ever experienced in my life. And so I think it will take many years to integrate that journey. I want to go back for sure. But part of what arose out of that was the Gaia Sadhana. It was clear that was something we were going to do together to practice with Earth. And I don't think that's the only thing we're going to practice with. And this kind of dismantling, this kind of becoming aware of the framework, the glasses that we look at life through, I think it's so in the air that, with the Me Too movement, with the much awareness around anti-racism work, it's like suddenly I experience it also even in my own relationship, in my marriage, is that I just begin to see so many of these frames that are limiting my perception. And I think it's exciting times we live in, because I talk with so many people who are experiencing this in different ways. That what we call kind of normal. It's not solid anymore. It's not working anymore. It's crumbling, and it can be scary. But there's a lot of things. There's a lot of possibility, of potential opening up from there. And for me, Tara, who is the next goddess we're going to practice with, she came in also. Part of what happens in the spring sadhana is that I go for 1 month to India in the winter, where it's my deepest practice. I do with the women there in the winter ashram in India. And there I practice for 21 days with the goddess that we're going to do sadhana with in the spring. So I've been practicing with Tara. And for me, she is that. She is that reality beyond the solid boxes that we want to put reality in.
Mm.
So, and she's also that leap we need to take when we leave. Actually, we leave the known, the shores of the known. We leave it, and then before we have reached any other new shores, we are just hanging in between. And talking to so many people today, especially women that I talk to, are experiencing this, that we are in between. We don't know, we know that all doesn't work. We don't know what the new, and we're in between. And Tara, her name means also the savior, and she's the one. She's she who carries us across. Is one of the meanings of her name. So she is that aspect of consciousness that can hold us, so that we don't reach just for the old, just because it feels so scary or so unclear and fuzzy and foggy and uncomfortable to be in this in between. And that's where we are gathering now, hundreds and hundreds of women gathering to actually become very conscious about our capacity to birth something new from that opening.
That's beautiful. I want to have you talk a little bit about that container. That's how I think of it, as a container that you've created during this time when we're actually practicing letting go of the old forms. And some of them are just being chopped out from underneath us. It's a little tenuous. And of course, in my own life, I've found that this, what I call the Yogini circle, the women who've come together largely around these twice a year sadhanas, it's a comfort. It's a place where I belong, where the ones who can see the shifting and know the bigger picture maybe come together. Can you talk about this beautiful, amazing, wonderful circle?
Yes. First of all, I did not create it. As I said, it's much bigger than what little we could create. Again, there was a listening, and I facilitated that to manifest together with an amazing team. And then together now, as you mentioning, with a community of women that are growing this field beyond what I could imagine. And it's basically a field where we are, and I think it's essential actually to gather together with women, because the momentum that will tell us that there's something wrong in that in-between place, which we collectively are in, that there's so much of the old structures are falling apart, and there's not so much clarity about the steps to take. We know a few steps, but there's also a lot of overwhelming and confusing, like, oh my God, what can I do? And there's a lot of forces, a lot of voices around us and inside us that will tell us kind of, get over it, or move on, or what you are concerned about is not important enough. You should watch the news more, or there's a lot of voices. And so one function that the circle has is just that we get kind of the message that, no, you're not crazy. You're not crazy. I feel the same. I feel that. And it's okay for it not to be clear right now. It's okay for it to not make sense. because it makes sense in a different way. If it makes sense according to the old paradigm, it's actually not a success. It can look like a success. I see so many women beating themselves up because, oh, I'm not doing it right. But within what roles, within what paradigm is it you try to fit in? What paradigm is it you try to be successful in? So for us in the circle, we can hold each other so that something deeper, something more nourishing can birth through us. I also love the circle as a spiritual method because it is reflecting the fruit of the method, or the result of the method, so to speak. Result is not so good word, I think, here, but I will use it because where we are landing, or what we are opening to in our practice, is it's a greater sense of self that is more connected to all things. There's a sense of relearning and remembering how to live in honoring, to live in interconnectedness with this magnificent world we are part of. And so it's not I would say it's a collective awakening. Right? So the method is collective and the result is collective, which I think is a good antidote to some of this more narcissistic aspect of our spiritual field.
As usual, some of what we talk about leaves me tingly, and without many words, just gaze into everyone's eyes and communicate that way. That would suit me. I'm a body worker, so.
Yeah, great.
I'm just checking to see if anyone has any questions for Chameli. We're not going to talk for too much longer, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to really ask about, her view. And I'm inspired now to interview some of the yoginis and ask about their experience of the circle in sadhana. So we begin the Tara on the 18th. And I know Chameli wants to offer a special offer for those of you who are on the call. And we're going to, if you haven't signed up for the call, we'll send it out through an email. But if you haven't signed up, there'll be a link down below. Oops, I'm just pointing down below where you can sign up. But otherwise, you can go to awakeningwomen.com/Tara, I believe. And awakeningwomen.com, on always the events are listed there. Emily, thank you for gathering with me today and talking about these precious, precious things. And I wonder if there's anything more you wanted to offer them.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about the word yogini. I remember I was, when I was 20, I told you already, I was in India. And I was up in Dharamsala with the Tibetan Buddhists there. And I remember I met a British woman, and she was a nun. She was a Tibetan Buddhist nun. She had her shaved head, she had her robe. And I looked at her, and there was such a click in my whole being. And I was like, I am going to be a nun. It was like absolutely sure that was my life purpose. And it was so passionate, and I was so feeling like, oh my God, I found my life purpose. This is what I need to do. And then it took 24 hours, and I fell passionately in love with a filmmaker from a Czech Republic or something. It was very hot and very serious, and we had this incredible kind of love affair that was very platonic because I was young. I think he was much older, but it was like, this in the monasteries and the monsoon rain and the dogs barking, and it was so passionate. And I realized that, okay, my nun fantasy just went down the drain because I could not, I couldn't, I felt a lot of things in my body and in my heart. And so this happened many times in my life. I was very, very, very passionate on the spiritual track, practice. And a part of it for me was like really like it was like an escape out of here. I'm like, God, I can practice and then I can just kind of not deal with relationship and all the pain and the drama. But every time I fell in love, and it became obvious to me that my path is not as a nun. But so that kind of left me a little bit sad, because it was that kind of clarity that I felt when I saw her was true. But it was a sense of all the maps and models I had as a woman was that I had to choose, either relationship, family, all of that, or I could kind of give it all to the spiritual path. And for me, when I encounter the lineage and the tradition of the yoginis, everything clicked into place, because the yogini is a woman who has put the spirituality at the very center of her life. That is what guides her through her life. And but that spirituality is on woman's terms. It's not in any way separated from her relationship, her family, her work, her creativity, her body, her sexuality. All of that is part of her path. So, we are searching for redefinition of what it means to be a woman's spiritual practitioner today. And for me, yogini is that word. Yogini is not only a person who do yoga like we do in yoga class. A yogi and yogini is just a term that means a spiritual practitioner. And the yoginis, they, following the work of Miranda Shaw, who is a scholar who has really researched lineages of Tantric Buddhism and found women teachers, women students, women practitioners. She found the yoginis, and we see a reflection of what is happening today. And of course, today it's happening in a much greater scale. And I feel that the yoginis from the past are celebrating what's happening today and go like, yeah. That's finally, we have the freedom and we have the technology to connect with each other on a scale that has not happened like this before. And for me personally, there's so many terms, like many people like to call them priestess, for example. I would never call myself a priestess. I've been practicing intensely for 25 years. I would not call myself a priestess yet. So that's just me. It's not a term that I can use. But yogini I can use. That's what I am, and many women feel at home in that term.
So you are yogini just like the rest of us?
Yes, I am practicing, and we have different seats in the circle. When I take on the hat of facilitating sadhana for us, I take on the facilitator seat, the teacher seat. The beauty of being a teacher in the women's circle, and many of us here know this, is that the women's circle won't allow us to be too attached to that seat or to that hat, or to create a new kind of identity of I'm special and I'm higher and lower and all of that. The circle is just going to kick you off the seat. Thank goddess. I'm very grateful for that, because that would be a horrible place to live, really. Yes, I'm grateful for that.
We have a couple of, just an aside too, is Miranda Shaw the one who actually speaks and reads and translates Sanskrit?
She does, yes.
Yeah, this was a revelation to me, because most of the translations, or all of the translations, I believe, were done by men.
Yeah, and she went back to the original manuscripts and went through all the translations. And what she found was that the feminine endings of the word disappeared. And especially when they were the scriptures were translated to European languages, French and English, Dutch. These people who brought the teachings to Europe 100 years ago were all men, and they lived in a Europe that had not seen women spiritual teachers. So when they found the women in the texts, they had no framework to put it in. Yeah, it just didn't exist for them. So they would have to put it into a framework they knew. So that would be, of course, the influence of their view on women. and women in authority and women in spiritual authority. They could not see it. So that's why in many tantric texts we read about women being slaves, prostitutes, similar to Maria Magdalena, isn't it? She also ended up as a prostitute because that was the easiest box we could put her in.
We have some ladies offering some questions. Is now a good time?
Yes.
First, Katie Kane says, so grateful for you, Chameli. And Kim Keller says, the teaching of the last years in sadhana have impacted both my work and my personal path in ways too numerous to share here. Thank you, love. And now Christine Heb, I think that's how you say her name. She says, can you speak about the flow that we can be in when we are connected? How can we practice this when there is no connection? Thank you and lovely greetings.
Yeah. So at the core of our practices, in one way, our yoga is when we have an experience, we practice to take off the resistance of the experience, and we practice to stay awake with more life force flowing through our bodies. When we have no training in that, we contract and we resist, and life force gets frozen. And out of this frozenness, we begin to act, and we begin to, even in our spiritual practice, we begin to grasp for freedom as if we have to make it up. And the more we grasp, the less connected we feel. And so that is the core of our practice. So the possibility when we are releasing the resistance, there is that possibility of, like, this is what we're going to practice with Tara, is that when life force is freed up from its habitual ways it goes, we can actually be quite creative. We can transform it, and not in the sense of that, oh, we have to fix it or grasp or cling to it, but transform it the way Earth is transforming energy all the time, is to align ourselves with the transformation that she does with the elements all the time, which we are made of. Everything is made of that. And deeper than that, there's this energetic building blocks that we can practice with. And what Christine is mentioning here is that sometimes if there's no connection, if there's no awareness, then of course we cannot practice. And this is the beauty of rooting ourselves in sadhana, in daily practice, is that I just had this experience just last weekend where I was in such a stuck place. It was like, these old patterns in my relationship was up, and I felt everywhere I was trying to go to find a solution, I just met dead ends. This is another pattern. It's just patterns. And I was just sitting in that kind of stuck place. And I was feeling like, where's the release, or where's the flow? And what happened was that I saw that in that trying to find solution, there was no flow. But then what we call alchemy happens. It's actually out of that impasse where energy was just like stuck, there was a transformation happening. That stuck energy became flow. But the moment, all the time I tried to push away that stuck energy, I avoided the door. I don't know if this is clear, but this is what we're going to practice with Tara. And sometimes for us, and we know this, is that sometimes our experience is numb. It is disconnected. It's split off. And we spend a lot of time in our circle to hold each other in that too. But that is also an experience that we can bring presence to. It just takes a little bit more patience. And just to complete that sentence that I was so stuck in, and in there, it's hard to even remember what to do, like the techniques and the sadhana and all of it. When it gets that kind of intense, then you have to trust that you have trained your body to take deep breaths. You have trained your presence to be able to stay with strong life energies. So a lot of our practices can seem a little boring in the moment. Like if we make our spiritual practices about an immediate result or experience, we miss the benefit of practice over time, which actually transform and change how energy goes in our body. Also, when we are in stormy weather, where it really is intense in our lives, we can then rely upon the pathways we have created through sadhana.
Yes.
So this is my passion, is this, that is to actually repeat, is to do sadhana over time, has a benefit that we oftentimes miss if we just go for instant gratifications all the time.